Hey there, fellow film fan. Ready for a deep dive into the world of film editing? You sent over your notes from Film/Video Editing 101, and we're about to take a century-long journey through the evolution of this incredible art form.
It's fascinating how editing really shapes our entire experience of a film. It's not just about cutting and pasting scenes together.
Hmm.
It's about creating emotion, building suspense, and even challenging how we perceive reality itself.
It's true. We get so caught up in the story, the acting, the special effects, that we rarely stop to think about the invisible hand guiding our emotions every step of the way. So where do we even begin with a topic this huge?
Well, let's rewind all the way back to the silent film era, when a cinematic pioneer named Georges Méliès was basically inventing the language of film as he went along.
Méliès. He's the guy behind that iconic image of the rocket in the moon's eye, right? A trip to the moon.
Exactly. And that film, back in 1902, was groundbreaking for its use of special effects and innovative editing techniques. Méliès was one of the first filmmakers to realize that you could use editing to create illusions, to manipulate time and space, and tell stories in a whole new way. Before him, films were little more than recordings of theatrical performances, often just one long, static shot.
Wow, I can't even imagine sitting through a 2-hour movie like that. Just one continuous shot. That must have been thrilling.
You might say. But Méliès realized that by breaking up those long shots, by introducing cuts and transitions, you could create a much more dynamic and engaging experience for the viewer.
He was basically creating movie magic. It's like that feeling you get when you're reading a really good book and you lose track of time because you're so engrossed in the story. The authors cleverly used their words to build that experience, and Méliès was doing the same thing with film. And as you mentioned, special effects were a big part of his magic, too.
Absolutely. And he didn't just invent these techniques out of thin air. He was a former magician. So he understood the power of illusion and how to manipulate an audience's perception.
So he brought that showmanship to filmmaking, and his bag of tricks opened the door for other filmmakers to experiment and push the boundaries of storytelling even further, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Take Edwin S. Porter, for instance, and his 1903 film, The Great Train Robbery. He took this new visual language that Méliès had introduced and applied it to a more narrative-driven story. He used parallel editing, or what we call cross-cutting today,
Ah.
to create suspense and draw the audience into the action.
Wait, hold on. Parallel editing. Are we talking about the technique where the film cuts back and forth between different scenes that are happening at the same time? Like the robbers are escaping on the train, but we also see the posse gathering to chase them down.
Precisely. It seems like such a basic technique now,
Hmm.
but back then it was revolutionary. It allowed Porter to build tension, create a sense of urgency, and even make the audience feel like they were in two places at once.
Wow, that's amazing. It makes you realize that all these editing techniques we take for granted today were once groundbreaking innovations. They were game changers that transformed the way stories were told on screen, and it all started with pioneers like Méliès and Porter.
It's true. But the evolution of film editing didn't stop there.
Huh?
In fact, another filmmaker came along who would take these techniques and elevate them to an art form. D.W. Griffith. Now, D.W. Griffith, he was a visionary in his own right. He took those early editing techniques, refined them, and essentially wrote the rulebook for what we now call classical Hollywood editing.
Classical Hollywood editing, that has a nice ring to it, but what does it actually mean?
It's all about creating a smooth, immersive viewing experience where the editing is practically invisible. Griffith's films, like The Birth of a Nation and Intolerance, use techniques like close-ups to reveal emotions, parallel editing to heighten drama, and the 180-degree rule to maintain spatial coherence.
Okay. I'm picking up on those terms, close-ups, parallel editing. We talked about those earlier.
Yeah.
But the 180-degree rule, that one rings a bell, but remind me what that is again.
Of course. Imagine two characters having a conversation. The 180-degree rule basically means that the camera stays on one side of an imaginary line between those characters. So when you cut back and forth between them, they stay on the same side of the screen. It helps maintain a sense of space and prevents the audience from getting disoriented.
Right. It just feels natural, even though I never realized there was an actual rule for it. Griffith really thought of everything. But I have to admit, whenever I hear his name, I always think about the controversy surrounding The Birth of a Nation.
Yes, it's a complicated legacy. The Birth of a Nation is undeniably a landmark achievement in filmmaking, but its racist depictions are deeply problematic and harmful. It's a stark reminder that even brilliant innovations can be used to tell dangerous and unethical stories.
It's a good reminder that we have to look at things in context. But while Griffith was refining this invisible editing style in America, over in Russia, a whole other film movement was taking editing in a completely different direction. They called it montage.
Absolutely. Montage, as practiced by filmmakers like Sergei Eisenstein and Lev Kuleshov, wasn't about seamlessness. It was about using editing to create a visceral, emotional impact on the audience. Think of it like this. Griffith's editing style was like a gentle stream guiding you along, while Eisenstein's was more like a raging river crashing into you with each cut.
That's a great analogy. So how did they actually use montage to achieve this effect?
Well, Eisenstein, in his film Battleship Potemkin,
Mm-hmm.
used rapid cuts, contrasting angles, and dynamic editing to depict the chaos and brutality of the 1905 Odessa steppe sequence. He wanted the audience to feel the intensity of the event, not just watch it unfold passively.
Right. I remember that scene, the baby carriage bouncing down the steps, the chaos of the crowds burned into my memory. And I bet a lot of that has to do with the editing.
Absolutely. And then you have Kuleshov, who demonstrated the power of editing with his famous Kuleshov effect. He took a simple shot of an actor's face with a neutral expression and cut it together with 3 different images: a bowl of soup, a child playing, and a woman in a coffin.
Wait, the same shot of the actor each time.
That's right. But what's fascinating is that audiences perceive different emotions on the actor's face: hunger, joy, grief, depending on the image that came before it. Kuleshov proved that it's not just about what's in the frame, it's about how those images are juxtaposed, how they relate to each other through editing.
So editing can actually manipulate our emotional responses to what we're seeing. That's kind of mind-blowing.
It really is. And as film continued to evolve, so did the ways in which editing was used to tell stories. But there was one major game changer that would revolutionize the industry: the introduction of sound.
Oh yeah, sound. I bet that threw a wrench into everything.
Yeah.
Suddenly, editors weren't just dealing with images. They had to think about dialogue, music, sound effects, a whole new dimension. Speaking of groundbreaking moments, I'm curious how that transition to sound actually happened. What was it like for editors who were used to the world of silent film?
It was a seismic shift. Imagine being an editor used to the world of silent film, where your focus was purely on visual storytelling. Suddenly, you've got dialogue to sync, music to score, and a whole soundscape to create.
Talk about a learning curve. It's like going from playing chopsticks on the piano to tackling Rachmaninoff. Did they have to invent completely new techniques to edit with sound? It really makes you appreciate those early sound editors and the challenges they faced. They were pioneers in their own right, figuring out how to tell stories in this whole new sonic landscape.
Absolutely. They had to experiment and innovate. And out of that came techniques we still use today, like using sound to create a sense of space, to build atmosphere, or to direct the audience's attention. Think about those heart-pounding chase scenes where the sound effects are perfectly synced to the action on screen. That's the legacy of those early sound editors.
And let's not forget about the Foley artists. Those folks are wizards with everyday objects, creating the sounds that make movies so immersive.
They truly are. The crunch of footsteps in the snow, the rustle of clothing, the clinking of glasses, those subtle sounds add a layer of realism that we often take for granted. And then you have the composers, who use music to heighten emotions, build suspense, or even completely transform the mood of a scene.
Right. Think about a movie like Jaws. Imagine that iconic shark attack scene without that chilling score. It just wouldn't be the same.
Exactly. Sound and editing work hand in hand to create the full cinematic experience. And as technology advanced, so did the possibilities. The invention of automated dialogue replacement, ADR for instance, allowed actors to re-record their lines in post-production, giving editors more flexibility and control over the final product.
Wait, so you're telling me that actors can actually re-record their lines after filming? How does that even work?
It's pretty amazing. They play back the scene in the studio, and the actor watches themselves on screen and re-records the dialogue to match their lip movements. A skilled ADR editor can make those replacements practically seamless.
Wow, that's incredible. I had no idea. So much work went into creating those seemingly effortless conversations on screen. It's like they're weaving together a tapestry of sound and image.
A very apt analogy. And speaking of weaving together sound and vision, we can't forget about the influence of auteur directors. These were filmmakers like Alfred Hitchcock, Stanley Kubrick, and Francis Ford Coppola, who saw editing as an extension of their artistic vision, a way to shape the story and control the audience's experience from beginning to end.
Oh, yeah. These were directors who were really involved in the editing process, right? They saw it as another way to put their stamp on the film.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They understood that editing wasn't just a technical process, it was a creative one, just as important as writing, directing, or acting. And they collaborated with some of the best editors in the business. People like Thelma Schoonmaker, known for her work with Martin Scorsese on films like Raging Bull and Goodfellas, or Walter Murch, who edited classics like Apocalypse Now and The Godfather, Part 3.
These editors were like the unsung heroes of those iconic films. It makes you appreciate the teamwork involved in creating a cinematic masterpiece.
Absolutely. But even as these auteur directors were pushing the boundaries of storytelling, a new technological revolution was on the horizon. The digital revolution.
The digital revolution, though, that was a game changer. We went from these giant, clunky editing machines to sleek computers with sophisticated software, no more literally cutting and splicing film. It's like we went from writing on clay tablets to using a touchscreen laptop.
It was a seismic shift, and it democratized filmmaking in a way that no one could have predicted. Suddenly, you didn't need access to a Hollywood studio to edit a film. Anyone with a computer and the right software could become an editor, experiment with different techniques, and share their work with the world.
It's like the Wild West of creativity exploded on the scene. We saw the rise of independent filmmaking, experimental films, and a whole new visual language emerging for music videos and eventually the internet.
Exactly. And digital editing software gave filmmakers even more tools to tell stories in innovative ways. Nonlinear editing allowed editors to jump around the timeline, experiment with different cuts and transitions, and create effects that would have been impossible with traditional film.
It's amazing to think about how far we've come from those early days of cutting and pasting film strips together. And now, with the rise of social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram, the possibilities for creative editing seem endless.
It's true. Today, everyone with a smartphone has a powerful editing studio in their pocket. They can shoot, edit, and share videos instantly, creating their own narratives and connecting with audiences around the world. And as technology continues to evolve, who knows what new editing tools and techniques await us in the future?
Virtual reality editing, AI-powered editing assistants. I can't wait to see what the future holds. But for now, I think our deep dive into the history of film editing has given us a whole new appreciation for the art form and the brilliant minds who shaped it.
I agree. It's a reminder that every time we watch a film or a video, we're experiencing the culmination of over a century of innovation, creativity, and a relentless pursuit of pushing the boundaries of visual storytelling.
So next time you're watching a movie, take a moment to appreciate the invisible art of editing. Those cuts, those transitions, that perfectly timed sound effect, they're all carefully crafted choices that shape our emotional journey as viewers. And maybe, just maybe, you'll be inspired to try a little movie magic of your own. Until next time on The Deep Dive.